Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depends on when this lesson is occurring, hopefully during lesson time. My name is Mr. Kanwar. I'm a Director of Science for Outward Grange Academies Trust, and I'm bringing you today biology. So this is biology. It is paper 2. It is a B5 topic on homeostasis and response. Okay, so that's where we are at. The title is Central Nervous System, so it's going to cover the first part of B5. This is the first lesson. And it is for all students. So whether you're on foundation, higher tier, or triple, it is for all students. So this is the first lesson for Central Nervous System. What you will need for this lesson is simply a pen and paper or your notebook and so forth. There'll be some activities within the lesson that you will have to complete, but just make sure that you have something to write with. That's the main thing. So Central Nervous System is your title and it is B5. Okay, hopefully you've got that down. Let us continue. So to start us off, in terms of a starter, what I'd like you to think about is how would your body react to stepping onto this pin? There's an image there of a foot and there are some drawing pins. That foot is clearly going to hit those drawing pins or step upon those drawing pins. And in your answer, and I'll give you some time to think about it, I want you to think about what would your foot do? So like, well, how would it react? How you would get the message about the pain. So how do you know, or how does that message get sent around the body? And then how your foot would know to move away. How does your foot know how to move away? That's what you need to think about. Now, you might have done this. This might be a lesson that you're doing as revision. This might be a lesson for the first time. You might know a little bit that you've learnt in Key Stage 3. You'll have to bring that knowledge, or you might just have, your prior knowledge beforehand. So I want you to think about how would your body react to stepping on this pin, and I shall give you 1 minute. There we go. Okay, so there we have our minute. So what answers did we get? Hopefully you got something along the lines of, what do you need to think about? What would your foot do? It would just move away. Okay, so you would have a reaction where it would probably move in the opposite direction to which way it was going. So you'd lift it up. How you would get the message about the pain? Well, hopefully you've got an answer, something to do with the brain. The brain will tell you that you've got some sort of pain, or there must be something on your foot, for example, your skin, and we'll come to that, that must detect it somehow. How your foot would know to move away? Well, there must be something. Your brain must decide that, or some message must get sent from your foot to somewhere, and then it tells your foot to move away. That's hopefully what you kind of got. Obviously, the actual answers we'll come to. So, what are we learning today? Our aspire and our challenge are fairly straightforward. So straight from the spec in terms of understanding. So we're going to challenge. Our challenge today is describe the reflex action and state the chemicals it involves. Our aspire, explain the importance of the reflex action. So why is it important, and describe how a reflex action works. Okay, so there are learning outcomes for today. So let us start with the nervous system. Now, because this is a lesson that is not live, you can take notes as we are going along. So hopefully you've got central nervous system as your title. You can have nervous system as your subtitle. There's an image there of all the nerves in your body. You can see that there's many of them. They are green. They are not green in your body. They are just green for this image to make them stand out a bit. So you can see our nerves, and there are lots of them. And you can see that there's a main trunk of nerves, which is also your spinal cord. You can see that here, and I'll just show you from here, just down there. So you can see that's your spinal cord. So that's a big, very, very thick, large nerve there. Your brain's got lots of nerves, and then you can see how your nerves spread across your whole body and so forth. So what is it made out of? So what is your nervous system made out of? Well, the brain. Okay, so that's one part, the brain, the spinal cord, and nerves. Okay, so that's what makes up the nervous system. What does it do? What is the function of the nervous system? It enables you to control your body. Yep, so it allows us to react to things. It gives you feedback about the world. So, for example, I'm looking at this computer screen. You are hearing the PowerPoint and this lesson. So you're getting feedback from the computer into your ears, and somehow you're converting that into a message that you then understand, which is obviously language. But you're also looking at it. And again, your eyes are converting whatever image they're getting into a message that your brain then comprehends. So that's what it allows us to do. That's what I mean by gives you feedback about the world around you. And then you're able to control it. So for example, I've told you that you need to take notes. And if you're taking notes, you'll be writing down those notes because you are in control of what you're writing. Yeah, and then you're listening, and that's the feedback about the world. So that's what the nervous system does. Brain, spinal cord, nerves. What does it do? Gives you control and enables you to feedback about what's going on. Now, here's an image of a real brain. There we go. A dissected brain and spinal cord. So now you can see the brain. You can see the thick spinal cord. So it looks kind of like a massive tadpole, but you can see, there we go, if my drawing is good, you can see that's the big thick spinal cord, and then you've got these things, and these things are all called neurons, and they are the strands where your impulses, your electrical impulses, are sent to your muscles, or the effector glands, which we will go through in a bit more detail. But you can see, without me drawing all of them, you can see that you've got lots of strands, neurons there. So a dissected brain and spinal cords make up your central nervous system. So your central nervous system is your brain and your spinal cord. Do not ever write spine. Spine are the bones in which the spinal cord is encased. Okay, so that's how, if you were to say spine, people will think that is the bone. You must always write spinal cord when you are thinking about your central nervous system. So what is the structure of the nervous system? So subtitle, structure of the nervous system. There are 5 key parts to it. Okay, there are 5 key parts to it. It starts off with your receptor. So what I'd do here is I'd probably draw a little flow diagram. So I'd put the arrows in as so, you can see, between each box. Your titles could simply be receptor. So this is your flow diagram. It goes from receptor here to sensory neuron, to central nervous system, to motor neuron, to effector organ. Okay, so that would be the order that I would go in. So let's talk about each one. So receptors. What are receptors? They are sense organs. Okay? They are found in the skin, the nose, the eyes, the mouth, and the ears. And each of these receptors detect different things. So for example, your skin can detect pressure. Okay? Say like you're putting your finger against another finger, you can feel pressure, and also it can detect a change in temperature. Okay, so it can detect pressure or a change in temperature. your nose, can smell, and that's chemicals. That's the same as your mouth. That can detect chemical. It also can detect temperature because you can feel it warm there as well. Your eyes, light, and your ears, sound. So that's what they all detect. And all those things that you detect is known as a stimulus. So for example, a stimulus is anything where there is a change in the environment. So if I were to look at something and I'm looking at the screen in front of me, however, there's someone sat next to me and they threw something towards me, my eyes would detect it, my ears would detect it through sound and through sight, through light, okay? They'd detect it. That'd be a change in the environment. That is called the stimulus. The receptor is what then detects that stimulus. So that whatever they're throwing at me, that is the stimulus, and the receptor detects it. Now, once they have detected it, they send an electrical impulse from the receptor to the second stage, which is the sensory neuron. Okay, so this is stage 2. I'll write that for you. Sensory neuron, stage 2. And the sensory neuron sends an electrical impulse to the sense organ, so that could be your finger, all the way to your brain or spinal cord. Okay, and that is your third stage, your central nervous system. So that is your brain or spinal cord. And in that, it will relay, and I'll write the word relay because that's the neuron it uses. Okay, it will relay that message to the fourth stage. So what you've got is you've got sensory neuron, and then in the central nervous system, you've got relay neuron because it relays the message, and it goes to the motor neuron. That message, still an electrical impulse, by the way, so this is all kind of electrical impulses, they will carry to the right part of your body. Okay, they will carry to the right part of your body. Once they've carried it to the right part of your body, it will go to your effector organs. Now, those effector organs are either your muscle, which will contract, or it could be a gland. So it could be a muscle that would contract, or a gland. And what do glands do? Hopefully you've answered that. What do glands do? They release hormones, or they release enzymes, or in others, but that's generally what you'll need to do. Hormones or enzymes are the two that you need to go with. So let me go through that again. Receptors, they detect the stimulus. Sensory neuron is where the message gets sent from the receptor to the central nervous system. That's stage 3. And that coordinates a response via a relay neuron. That then sends an electrical impulse down from the brain or the spine through the motor neuron to different parts of the body. And those parts of the body could be your gland, or it could be a muscle. It could tell the muscle to contract. So for example, the foot would lift up, or it will send a message to the gland, and that gland will release something. So that's the structure of the nervous system. Big key part that. If you've not managed to get all those notes down whilst I've spoken, then just pause the video. However, there are some notes at the end that you can, at the end of this lesson, that you can grab. Okay, so that's the structure of the nervous system. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 2 minutes, and I want you could write this down, you could write it down, or you could just jot the answer down, up to you how you want to do it. Write down the sentences, or write down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. I want you to come up with the answers. Now, what I will do is I'm going to give you 2 minutes for this. For the first minute, I'll be absolutely silent so you can read through it and give you a chance to write down the answers. For the second minute, I will give you hints and clues, not in order, of the answers that are possibly available. Okay. So we'll label them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Quite good at that now. Had plenty of practice. So I'll read through it. The central nervous system coordinates a something. It is where all the information from the something organs is sent and where something and actions are coordinated. The central nervous system consists of the something and the something something. The something transmits information as impulses to the CNS. Instructions are then sent from the central nervous system to the something, for example, muscles and glands. I am going to give you 2 minutes, starting now. So let's give you some hints about what some of the answers could be, and not in order. So one of the answers could be effector. Okay, so one of the answers could be the effector. Another answer could be sensory. Spinal cord. I think I've kind of given it away. Response. Reflex action or reflex. Nerves. Neurons. And brain. So they're the answers that you could possibly have. Okay, time's up. So let's go through them. The central nervous system, CNS, coordinates a reflex action or reflexes. Okay, that's what you can have for that. Any of those will do. So it coordinates a reflex action. I mean, that is the aspire, and that's what this lesson's all about, and challenge. It is where all the information from the sensory organs, so remember, we've got 5 sensory organs: skin, eyes, nose, mouth, and ears. Just trying to make sure that I've said them all. Yeah. So they're up, and they detect temperature, pressure, chemical, light, sound. Okay, they're the 5 things that they could do. From the sensory organs is sent, and where responses and actions are coordinated. Okay, responses and actions. The central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord. Okay, that's what it consists of. The nerves or neurons, I don't mind which one. Nerves is plural, neuron is obviously just talking about the singular. So the nerves or neurons transmit information as impulses to the central nervous system. Instructions are then sent from the central nervous system to the effectors, E-F-F-E-C-T-O-R-S, if you don't know how to spell that, effectors, for example, the muscles and glands. Okay, so that was just a little progress check just to make sure they're on the right lines. If you're on the right lines, brilliant. If you're not, just make sure that through your notes you've got the right ones now. Okay. So this is what a neuron looks like. So you can see that there are 2 neurons there. Okay. there are two neurons. One's a sensory, that's the top one, and one's a motor. You can see that at the bottom. What I want you to think about is what's the difference between them. And that's a simple description. Give me 1 minute. What's the difference between those neurons? It's hard to put this somewhere without it not. There you go. So what are the differences between those two neurons? You don't have to remember this diagram. You'll have to recognize it just in the fact that they are neurons. You can see that they're quite big as well. Okay, so like I said, the first one is a sensory neuron. So the sensory neuron carries information from the receptor. So remember, again, that can either be skin, eyes, nose, mouth, ears. So it carries it from there, and that's what the dendrons are. You can see that they're the dendrons. They're the ones that are like in your skin. Obviously, you can't feel them or anything, but they're in your skin or they're on the edge of your ear and so forth. And that information is carried via an electrical impulse. If I were to draw, there we go. Looks like an electrical impulse. It travels in that direction as the arrow goes. So it goes from the dendron. You can see that the cell body's there, all the way along something called the axon. You do not need to know that for GCSE, but it's useful to be familiar with the term. So it travels down the axon and then ends up at these points. And at those points, it will then jump across, and we'll talk about that. It will jump across to another neuron, which is known as the relay neuron. Eventually, it will go via either the brain, so I'll write that there, not very well, or the spinal cord, which I'll call SC. It will jump, it will go there, and then it will come to this one, which is a motor neuron, cross there, and down the axon again. There we go. Into the cell body. Now, the cell body is slightly different. Into the dendrites, and the dendrites will then pass that information on to the effector. So what's the difference? Well, you can see that the cell body is in a different place. Okay. And also, the dendron here is at the start. The dendrites are at the end. Okay, so there's a difference here. The dendrons are at the start because that's getting the information and sending it to the brain or the spinal cord. But now the motor neuron, the second one, is got that information already and is now telling the body to do something. So all these will tell the body, the muscle or the gland, to do something. Now the likelihood is it will tell it to do two things. One, muscles contract. Remember that. Muscles contract. 2, glands release enzymes or digestive juices or hormones. Any of those will be fine. So that's what it does. That's what the two differences are between them. Some questions for you to think about now. Reflex action. Why do we need a nervous system? What would happen if we didn't have a reflex? And are all of our reflexes voluntary? Now, what do I mean by that? Either reflexes are voluntary or they are automatic. Okay, so they happen without us thinking, therefore they are automatic. Or I decide I want to pick up my mobile phone next to me, but that's a voluntary action. I'm deciding that. However, my eyes blinking at the moment that I'm picking it up, that's not voluntary. That's automatic. So some of them are automatic, some of them are voluntary. I've kind of given that answer away now. Are all of our reflexes voluntary? Clearly not. But what you can do is you can give me some examples. I'll give you 1 minute to think about that. Here we go. Okay, so from a simple response, why do we need a nervous system? We need it to keep us safe. Yeah, it keeps us away from danger. It keeps us safe. It enables us to react to things around us. What would happen if we didn't have a reflex? It would mean that we'd get hurt. So there are certain things that happen automatically, and we're not thinking about it. For example, sometimes that image that we showed at the start of the lesson of someone putting their foot on some pins, the reaction happens so quick we don't think about it. It's an automatic reaction. So it answers part 3. Are all reflexes voluntary? No, they are not. There are lots of reflexes that are involuntary. Okay, that means we don't have any control over them as such. However, that is because the information that gets sent goes to the spinal cord. So it doesn't need to go through our brain. We don't necessarily need to think about everything. Some things just happen automatically. And that's a safety mechanism that our body is better adapted to the environment around us. So reflex actions. What's the difference between voluntary and automatic reflex actions? As it says, voluntary responses are mainly under conscious control. But some voluntary movements, such as walking, require less conscious attention. Okay? And there are some voluntary ones that we are in control of. Like, for example, you can force yourself to blink. But for the most part, you're not in control of blinking. It just occurs. An involuntary action is one which occurs without the conscious choice of an organism. If it occurs specifically in response to a stimulus, it will be known as a reflex. So that would be my finger accidentally touched a hot pan. I wouldn't have to think about it. It would automatically move away. I'm not saying everything else would be fixed, but it would automatically move away. Okay, so that's a reflex because it's something you react automatically to. In terms of it's an involuntary action that does not involve the conscious part. Okay, so that's reflex action. So just a little progress check on reflex action. We've got different colours. We've got orange, blue, green, yellow, red, purple, and like dark blue. They are all words within a reflex action that we need to come up with. Now what you've got, let me show you. What you've got, this is like stage 1 here. I'll choose green. This is like stage 1. Okay, in stage 1, you've got a finger basically kind of touching a cactus. Stage 2, spinal cord, that is not the brain. So you've got something occurring at the spinal cord. Stage 3, you've got the hand lifting away. Okay, so you've got 7 words. You can see that that orange one is the first. So in order, it's orange, blue, green, yellow, purple, dark blue, and red. So just think about what it is that it's pointing to. I'm going to give you 2 minutes. Have a go and see if you can fill that in. Or you can write the answers down, I should say, for those. So you've got 2 minutes. You've got 1 minute remaining, and what I'll do is I'll give you some hints. I'm not sure what's going on with my computer, but there seems to be some extra actions in it. But anyway, give you some hints. You've got all 3 neurons in there: sensory, relay, motor. I think you've got spinal cord in there as well. You've got effector. You've got receptor. and you've got stimulus. So think about the order that you'd go in, and that's how you should answer it. Okay, so you've got all three neurons, effector, spinal cord, receptor, stimulus. Think about what stimulus means, changing the environment. That should kind of get you started, to make sure. And then we'll go through the answers. Okay, so let's have a look. Number one, stimulus. The change in environment is the fact that that person has decided to touch the cactus. Stimulus, change in environment. Number two, the receptor. The skin detects the change in pressure. It hurts. That's the reason. So it hurts. It sends a message down the sensory neuron. Okay, so down that sensory neuron from the tip of the finger, so from the fingertip. I'll do it in red so you can see. So from there, it's going to travel down the sensory neuron to here. Then it's going to jump across to the relay neuron, which is in the spinal cord, and then it will move along this one, which is the motor neuron, all the way to here, which is the effector, which happens to be a muscle in the finger, and it will cause the hand to move away. So stimulus, receptor, sensory neuron, relay neuron, spinal cord, motor neuron, and effector. Hopefully you managed to get 7 out of 7. You've got 5 out of 7, that's pretty decent. Just make sure that you've got the right answers now. That diagram, in terms of labelling it, you should be able to label it. They'll probably give you some hints in regards to it, so they might give you the boxes and you might have to write them in. Okay. So I've spoken a lot about in reflex actions, you've got this gap. So you can see, this is from an exam question actually, you can see you've got neuron 1 and you've got neuron 2. That's a relay neuron, so presumably neuron X is a motor neuron, as it's the one after. And then there's this gap. That gap is called the synapse. So subtitle, the synapse. This is a popular question on both foundation and combined and triple. Sometimes it's worth 3 marks and they ask you to explain what happens at a synapse. The first thing you always write, it is the gap between 2 neurons. And that's what it is. You can see that there is this gap between 2 neurons. Now, what happens is the impulse, there's the electrical impulse, it's coming down here. But the problem is the electrical impulse can't jump across that gap. Okay? So what it does is it causes these chemicals, so you can see these circles here, these chemicals known as neurotransmitters, I'll underline that word, neurotransmitters, it causes them to be released. And what happens? Those chemicals diffuse across the space known as the synapse. Okay, so the chemical diffuses across. If you want to write the 3 steps, you can. However, you could probably cut it down. You could just simply write step 1, impulse causes the release of neurotransmitters. Step 2, neurotransmitters diffuse across the gap called the synapse. Step 3, once the chemical reaches the other side, you can see the chemicals reach the other side there, it triggers an impulse to carry on down the next neuron. Okay? So your neurons all travel at the same speed. The only thing that slows and speeds it up is the time it takes for the neurotransmitter to diffuse across. Now here's a question for you. Or here's a point, I should say. It's not a question. If you drink alcohol, it slows your reactions down. We learned that in physics. We learned that in biology. If you drink alcohol, it slows your reaction down. Now, why does it slow your reaction down? It does not slow your reaction down because your impulses are slower. It does not do that. It slows the reaction down because the chemical diffuses across slower. Okay? That's how it slows it down. So if you speed it up, then your reactions will get quicker, such as caffeine can have that effect. So the synapse, really important part of the nervous system, generally later on in the paper, but it could be early on in the paper, they could give you some tick boxes, worth 3 marks. And this is what you get your 3 marks for. Synapse is a gap, 1 mark. It causes, neurotransmitters / chemical, 2 marks, diffuse, that's your 3rd mark, across the gap and triggers an impulse in the other neuron. That's what you would get your marks for the synapse. If you need to get those notes down, just pause the video. Alternatively, we shall move on. So, we've gone through the central nervous system, we've spoken about synapse, we've spoken about reflexes, we've spoken about automatic, and we've spoken about voluntary. Here's an exam question for you. That's worth 4 marks. Okay, so you've got an eyelid and you've got a bee or wasp or something like that. It's a bee actually. In the blink reflex, so it tells you it's a reflex, light from the bee reaches the light-sensitive cell in the eye. The muscles in the eyelid shut the man's eye before the bee hits the eye. Describe the pathway taken by the nerve impulse in the blink reflex. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 3 minutes, but I'm going to give you 1 minute on this slide and 2 minutes on the next slide. The next slide is some scaffolding. So if you're struggling with what to write for 4 marks, then I'll give you some help with that. So 1 minute on this one, and then I will move on to the next one to give you some extra help. So 4 marks is worth 4 bullet points. So describe the pathway taken by the nerve impulse in the blink reflex. Think about the order. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll put 2 minutes. You might want to get this down, but it should hopefully help you. So, model answer. As I'm talking, your 2 minutes is counting down, but basically 4 marks is 4 bullet points. Okay, so what I've done is I've given you 4 sentences that you kind of need to get down for this question. You just need to fill it in now. Okay, so let's go through the answer. So remember the question was, describe the pathway of a blink reflex. So you're seeing a B. So receptor at the eye transmits a signal to the sensory neuron. Okay, so the receptor at the eye transmits a signal to the sensory neuron. Number 2, the sensory neuron transmits the signal or sends an electrical impulse, it's up to you, to the central nervous system. Through the relay neuron / CNS, the signal is passed to the motor neuron. Okay, the motor neuron then passes that signal to the effector, which is known as, in this case, the eyelid. Okay, so that's the pathway that is taken. It's 1 mark for each bit, basically. So if you got sensory relay motor neuron, you'd get 3 marks pretty much if you were able to describe exactly which one's going from what. So basically, let's just go through that again. Sensory, receptor to CNS. Relay within the CNS. Motor from the CNS to the effector, which is what you'd get the 4th mark for. So you need to mention the effector. Obviously, you can mention the electrical impulse. That would probably get you a mark. That's been transmitted. No marks here for synapse or gap because it's not asking that particular question. Okay. Hopefully, we managed to get at least 2 out of 4 for that, and hopefully many of you got more. Okay. With all these lessons, what I shall put down are the summary notes. Now, these might be notes you didn't have time to to write down or within the lesson, but they are notes that you need to get down. Now, if you've got the revision booklets, they are basically the same. So this is nervous system summary points 1, and it is the order that you basically need to remember of the nervous system. So you've got stimulus, and I've got the definitions for each one. Stimulus, which is the change in the environment. Receptor detects the stimulus. Sensory neuron, it's the receptor that produces an electrical impulse that travels to the CNS. Relay neuron or coordinator, brain and spinal cord. Motor neuron, from the CNS to the effector. The effector, the muscle contracts or the glands release hormones and enzymes. A couple of years ago, that was a 4 marker. There was a table and it asked you to write down the 2 effectors, so 1 mark for muscle, 1 mark for glands. It then said, what do they do? So the muscle contracts, another mark, and then the glands release hormones, enzyme, 4th mark. So that would be, it was a really easy table. And if you knew it, you got 4 marks really easily. But if you didn't, obviously you'd struggle. And then the response, the end action resulting from the stimulus. That's summary points 1. Summary point 2. Just a couple of sentences what the nervous system is all about. So it allows our reactions, enables reactions to the surroundings and can coordinate behavior. And then the second point is about reflex actions. They're automatic and rapid. So they happen without thought and they do not involve the conscious part of the brain. So just the spinal cord, remember. And then the key part is the synapse. So remember, synapse, 1 mark, and that's what these arrows represent. They basically represent a mark. Gap between any neuron. 2, chemical or neurotransmitter diffuses across. You can see that in stage 2. 3, produces an electrical impulse in the next neuron. Okay, sometimes you could just get 3 marks for gap between any neuron, chemical neurotransmitter, and it diffuses across. Okay, right, so that is the nervous system and the synapse all explained. Any points, get them down at the end. The next lesson for combined, we'll be moving on to homeostasis, also looking at the required practical, but not too much. So you're looking at homeostasis and hormones. However, for those on triple, your next lesson will be the brain and the eye. So that's what you need to look for. Okay, thank you very much for joining me. Hope you had hope you learned something and had a good lesson. I shall see you next time. Goodbye.